This is the fourth video in a series showing the gameplay from the Modern Challenge that took place on the 29th of September, in which I finished top 4 playing my build of 4-color Keruga Omnath, which you see in front of you here. I'll be covering the gameplay and giving my play-by-play commentary for each of the games in round 4. And if you missed the previous round's gameplay for this challenge, there's the playlist linked in the description for this video. Also, the deck list and the free sideboard guide are also linked in the video description, so check those out too as well. With all that said, let's get on with the games. Round 4, game 1. I win the die roll, so I have to go first. My opponent reveals a Giganta the Wellspring, but I already know which Giganta deck this is. It's Boros Energy. This is Misplaced Ginger. At the time, he had already won 2 back-to-back Modern Challenges with Boros Energy, so I assume this would be the same deck. I had to mulligan to 6 because it was a 1-lander, so it's pretty much usually always better to try and mulligan to 6 and try and find a hand with 2 lands. Usually you find it. But I make my first mistake, and I think the mistake that actually determines the entire game here. I put away the Supreme Verdict, which is a mistake because just from experience, it is better against the energy decks to lean on card advantage that takes away their board than it is to lean on card advantage that adds to your hand. And the reason is because that's pretty much the only asset of the Boros energy deck. It can deploy a lot of creatures and apply a fast clock, but if you can deal with that in a really efficient way, it doesn't really matter when you draw the ring. You can draw it whenever and still win. This 6 otherwise would have been perfect, because we even have Blood Moon Insurance in the form of Fable the Mirror Breaker. We have 2 pieces of cheap removal to deal with any early threats, so stuff like Ragavan, God of Souls. And we didn't need to have the ring this early on. So the reason why Supreme is also ideal with these 2 specific pieces of removal, that Gone and Fire Ice, is that say they have a curve of 1-drops and 2-drops, you can kill them, and then they might try and go for a big push with the guide into Ambraptor, say, on turn 3. And then what you could do is you could let loose the Sweeper, the Supreme Verdict, and then you stabilize, and the Fable potentially dig you into more stuff. It itself is card advantage, and that's essentially why the Supreme Verdict is just better here than the ring. Yeah, first mistake, and the only mistake I think that really determines the outcome of the game overall. We play Aramisa first. It's the most useless fetch. Not useless, I say it's least desirable fetch against the Boros Energy matchup, because it only fetches plains as a basic land that is relevant. Fetching Mountain, it can be relevant, but you want to fetch around Blood Moon first. So yeah, it only really offers me plains here. So I'd rather use it for surveil lands. Try and find this 3rd land. And hopefully eventually 4th land. You don't find the 3rd land. And I make the decision here to fetch plains and ice their land. There's 2 good reasons to do this. One, I haven't got the 3rd land. So you might think, isn't it just better to wait until end step and get a Lush Portico so you can try and have another look at finding the 3rd land? And the answer is no, because then they just apply clock. If they have an untapped land, they go Ajani, and then I'm only taking out the Ajani potentially, and I'm leaving that token on board if I don't draw my 3rd land. So icing here and fetching plains lets me start playing around Blood Moon by fetching the planes, but also it denies them a mana, which means they have to put something a bit more underwhelming with their untapped land if they have one. So not only, and also Ice digs me an extra cards. So not only do I still try and get to dig to the third land, I'm actually denying my opponent mana, which is better since it also fulfills the goal of delaying pressure as much as possible. That's the play I make here. And we do find the third land, so that's good. And yeah, Gas Souls. Imagine this is in a Johnny, it'd be much trickier if we didn't have this third land. We didn't know it, we'd have this third land as well. So with the third land, I fetch Island. As I said, my goal is to try and play around Blood Moon as much as possible. And then I have a decision to make. So I could have played the Fable. But since we already have Island Plains, there's not much imperative to play around Blood Moon at this point with using the Fable. However, a thing that my opponent could do next turn is go off with this Sky of Souls. Say they have Amp Raptor, that's 3 energy right there, and they could potentially find the Blood Moon anyway. Also, this guy's souls could just attack me if they say have creature and then a Johnny, and then they have 3 counters. Attack. They bump it to 3, and that's just a lot of pressure already. And then it's out of my ability to kill with the Dead Gone. This guy's souls, if they get to do that. The Fairy allows me to bounce this, to delay it a bit more. Dig a bit further into my deck. Say I want to find either Supreme Verdict or Rough Tumble, or even an untapped land for this ring, should I want to play it. And it also gives them something to deal with. It presents something for my opponent to try and deal with. Particularly against the line of Guide Amp Raptor. So I bounce this Guide. They can't just go Guide Amp Raptor and get value there. They have to get rid of this Teferi first. And if they do, they have a bolt or get a discharge, that's fine, because now we're sharing their mana still. So Teferi is definitely the ideal play here. And we do draw the 4 untapped lands. Yep, and they have to discharge. And they don't even draw a 3rd untapped land, they just draw a Surreal land. And here I make the second mistake of the game. So the correct play here, again with that line of thinking, I was saying we have to ensure that the board's clean. We have to ensure that they can't gain advantage, they can't get their energy plays going. So the correct play here was actually just to kill the Goddess Souls with Dead before they had the chance to attack with it and put it out of range of my Dead Gone. The ring here could have been played at any point in this game. I actually didn't even need to play it at this point. All I had to do was play Dead Gone, add Keruga. That was also a great play because, say they do Blood Moon, I'd have Pitch Fodder for the Force of Vigor immediately, and I could actually just play the ring then. Because it doesn't matter if Blood Moon's on the board or not, you can always play ring. And if they decide to play Blood Moon, for example, they wouldn't be committing any more creatures. It'd be strength 3 mana into a non-creature spell. So with that play of Dead Gone, I would have been able to get rid of their only creature. They have barely a clock, and I have a card advantage engine waiting in hand. Actually, I have 2. But again, this also highlights the mistake of why the One Ring should have been not kept in hand. Because Fable already kind of fulfills the role of the One Ring here, while playing around Blood Moon. And then Supreme Bird offers my hand something else, should they be able to swarm with this 3 mana they're about to untap into. So yeah, this ring was absolutely unnecessary at this point in the game, considering all the other cards in my hand. And yeah, they really go off here, yep. Guy the Johnny, all the energy you could ever want. Buff the guy souls once. I try and ambush here with a Solitude, but yeah, they have way too many energy counters at this point. I try and flip the Ajani. And I'm able to Solitude the remaining Ajani after Legend Rule applied. They hit me for so much here. Yeah, that one mistake of not killing this first guy, the souls, when I had the chance. It's looking like it's definitely going to cost me the game here. So I have to try and just gain some life. I bait a block with the token so I can at least make some progress towards getting rid of their entire board. And yeah, at this point they're just buffing their creatures beyond what Rough and Tumble could deal with. Actually, not Rough and Tumble, but just Rough. I could play Tumble here, so Tumble's still good for something. It's not ideal. It's pretty much Supreme Verdict or bust. I have to Fairy to bounce the ring again. But yeah, this ring is what's going to lose me the game. Just the temptation of it being in my hand, keeping it in my hand. And again, I basically figured out that was a mistake from experience. Because I know that the only way you really beat Boros energy is by getting card advantage, which depletes their board, as opposed to increasing the number of cards in your hand. Because it doesn't matter how many cards I have. If I can't play all of them, and they're threatening the clock, I'm just dead. That's the philosophy fire, basically. They attack my Teferi, gain some life here with the Soft Flood Pride. Go off it with the City's Blessing to get more energy and making more tokens. At this point, I hope to get lucky that they don't have any burn damage and I can produce enough stuff off the top to remove enough cards from this board, or just a Supreme Verdict. I'm on 3 life too. I'm on 2 life effectively here. Not ideal. Because I'm in Flage range. My opponent's Flage does. I've actually expanded on my basics, so I choose the play of double Flage because that gets me the most life and the most creatures on board back. Yeah, I can just bin pretty much anything here. The lands. And I just want to highlight something here. So I'm pretty much losing this game. Like there's no way they don't have Bolt or even just a Flage if they hit. There's no way they don't have the fifth land either. But the role of Force of Vigor in this matchup is really, really important. Just being able to hit stuff when you're tapped out, like Static Prison. Say I had 2 less attackers here, I can still survive, and it's just because of this Force of Vigor. So this is why I really like this card in these right now in the meta because of Static Prison and Goblin Bombardment and Blood Moon. It's really not as narrow in terms of application. It's just narrow in the number of targets, but the application is very much easy because there's a lot of artifacts and enchantments that are significant, important to various game states in the meta right now. And this is an example of one of them. Yeah. Just trying to survive here. Kill the guide so then they can't buff anything else and give it flying. That gives me enough blockers at least to survive, assuming they have no burn damage. Can use the Force of Vigor. The one of Tishanas can prevent this ring from killing us. Yeah, I'm exactly at 1 life here. But if they have any burn, I just lose. And yeah, they do. This is the Flache. And I'm dead. So yeah, that one mistake in Mulligans where I overvalued the ring when I already had the Fable, which fulfills basically a similar role and helps me play under a Blood Moon better, and not keeping the Supreme Verdict, which I could have used to essentially neutralize this board and actually probably win the game. Cost me quite big. But yeah, on to game 2. Round 4, game 2. I'm on the play again, so I lost last game. I mulligan another 1-lander. Keep the 6 with 3 lands. I think I put away the Endurance because I want to be able to cast a Solitude just in case I don't draw enough lands. Opponent mull to 5, but they present Ragavan. So I have the Fire Ice for that. Just get Thundering Falls. Play the Aramisa, prepare to get Plains. Or Surveil Land. Depends on what I need here. I think it's Surveil Land, because Elesh Norn, if I could cast it this game. If I just draw land. And yeah, I got another land, so that's 4 lands already. And I have Fire Ice. I tap, try and find the 5th land with the ice. But also because I'm not quite ready for a Blood Moon yet. Go Ajani, Raptor. Fetch to try and cast a Supreme Verdict. And then they Blood Moon me. So at that point, I had a couple of outs actually. Outs or ways to play under this thing. So I could draw one of my 3 rings, one of my 2 Force of Vigors, the Fable, or the actual Plains. Or even an island would help here because of just any basic that can help cast a fairy would be a good way to work towards something that eventually either temporarily or permanently outs this Blood Moon. So I drew the Fable. And they have the ring. So it's not looking great for me. It's okay, but it's quite a strong board that my opponent's presenting. I draw the 5th land, but now I have a decision to make. So my first consideration is, how do I equalize with this ring? I could potentially draw into one of my own rings. Or alternatively, what I could do is I could present a card that is potentially worth multiple cards in their hand, which is basically like temporarily presenting your own way of getting card advantage to equalize against the ring. So that card would be Elesh Norn. So Elesh Norn would stop further Amp Raptors, which is quite useful here because they don't have white mana. So Amp Raptor is the only way they can really cheat on that requirement of white mana, unless they draw the planes. 8 planes, play 2. I could guarantee my 5th land, so just keep the Stomping Ground. Or I could try and draw into planes or another basic that gets me out of this Blood Moon slowly, bit by bit. Or I could try and draw into other things, like Force of Vigor. So, in my mind, I have to equalize with the ring first. Fable helps that, but I know that Elesh Norn is a pretty good way to do that. So I know that I'm keeping the Elesh Norn for sure. which means that if I'm gonna keep this Solitude, I either have to draw planes and hope this Goblin Shaman gets an attack through, or I draw another white card. My opponent isn't really presenting anything yet in terms of creatures. So I think the Solitude is a minor consideration in this hand. And the Stomping Ground doesn't help me get out of this Blood Moon. So Stomping Ground stuff is getting discarded. And the fact that Solitude, if I was gonna hedge for not drawing another white card, which is possible, or another white card I don't actually want to pitch, so it's like a Teferi. And this Solitude isn't doing much in my hand unless I draw exactly planes. And this Goblin Shaman gets to attack. So through that reasoning, I'm discarding Solitude and Stomping Ground. Because Tisha's Tidebinder, even here, can temporarily out the ring, just in case it dies, I guess. And now my Goblin Shaman has been able to attack. I'm presented with another choice. I could hold up Tisha's Tidebinder to out the One Ring temporarily. But I think the odds of them drawing Burn Spell, or even drawing an Amp Raptor and flipping it off the Amp Raptor, is much higher than the likelihood of this Tisha's Tidebinder staying on the board for a few more turns. And actually, they could just have another ring, which makes the Tisha's Tidebinder a lot worse. So I go for the virtual card advantage line by playing the Elesh Norn, and that prevents potential Amp Raptors off the top. And it also blocks. And actually, most importantly here, it attacks. So I have to realize that I can't be defensive now, because they have the control piece in the One Ring. But I also can present a very resilient attacker. Elesh Norn is actually quite resilient. On this board state, they have to go Amp Raptor into... Oh, they can't even Amp Raptor because the ETB doesn't trigger, which means they don't gain any energy. So they have to have Bolt Discharge. Basically, they have to deal this with 2 cards. So it neutralizes the 2 cards additional that the ring will get them on the next turn temporarily. And if they don't draw that specific combination of cards, remember, it's still a very specific combination, those 2 burn spells, or any 2 burn spells for that matter, then I get to attack with this Elesh Norn. So, yeah, I play the Elesh Norn. Yeah, my opponent just adds a Gigantha to hand. My Goblin Shaman somehow still survives. Add Keruga to hand, because now I want to start trying to draw into Force of Vigor. And the nice thing about Elesh Norn is it fits really nicely in the beatdown plan, because the ring protection doesn't trigger either. So yeah, I assume my opponent drew a bunch of uncastable stuff into this Blood Moon, which locked them out, and the Elesh Norn managed to punch through the damage we needed to win the game before their One Ring took over the game and potentially got them a planes or something like that. So yeah, this was a nice showcase of how Elesh Norn can win games in the face of the One Ring without your own One Ring. And yeah, that was a pretty nice win. On to game 3. Round 4, game 3. I'm going to be on the draw for the first time in this match. Pretty decent 7, so reasons why I keep this. I have the Solitude for the turn 1 Ragavan, which they don't present, but it's a good reason to keep this hand. I have Force of Vigor to anticipate a potential Blood Moon, or Static Prison, or Common Bombardment, so I have a lot of key permanents covered here with this card. And Teferi is just a way to try and get a bit of value and get on the board, along with the Flage, which is another way to do that. This also means that with the Force of Vigor, I can be a bit more aggressive in my fetching. I can just fetch Surveils, or I should say Thundering Falls, because I already have Lush Portico, to try and find the requisite to be the 4 lands I need to play the game. And yeah, opponent kept the 7, starts off with a tap land. Yep, play the Surveil first. Don't need the Force of Vigor, I already got one in hand. Opponent presents Ragavan Dash. And just a general habit that you should engage in, just Solitude this thing. Don't let them get the mana. You might think this isn't that scary. They're not untapping into. They're not presenting 3 mana all at once. Just don't let them get the mana. It's really just a good habit to kill this thing when they do this, because every extra mana you give them is an extra creature on the board usually, and you're trying to stem the pressure. Or even worse, it gets them into turn 3 to 1 ring, which is way more annoying because you're only about to play, especially when you're on the draw. So the -1 is fine here. Don't think just because then they've not got that much mana after the Ragavan hits, it's not that threatening. No, that extra mana is everything. And now they play Blood Moon. So, as I said, I can be a bit more aggressive in my fetching. Try and find the 3rd and 4th land. We found the 3rd, let's try and find the 4th. And we can add Keruga to enable this Force of Vigor. There we go, Amp Raptor. Pretty nice hit. Johnny. And draw the island. So this is pretty nice, since what I'm going to try and do is I'm just going to try and block this Ajani with this Ishan's Tidebinder. Because I don't know what they're up to next. And I don't know if I can get value off this Tidebinder with this current mana situation. So I just want to try and thin their hands, try and figure out what's in it. And try and block the Ajani in the process, especially when they have 1 planes, they can still flip this thing after the attack, which would be very annoying. Play Flage, so at this point I know it's safe. Go Force of Vigor on the Blood Moon. And I have the Flage for their Ajani. Pretty nice. And I fetch the planes now to hedge for a future Blood Moon. Take a few beats here, but this Ajani being off the board is really nice. Just means I'm a bit safer. And they could have Flaged Escape here. I'm guessing they have something to hold up. Yeah, the Ocelot Pride. And that develops their board, so pretty good for them. I have 2 fetches. It's super nice here, because I could have the option of just casting the Flage, but since I drew the ring, let's just play the ring, so then I can try and get my life total back to a healthy amount by fetching on my opponent's turn as well, with the spare fetch I held up. And here is notable, because this is probably one of the rare exceptions where I do name one of the type lines on Flage with Cavern of Souls, since I'm short on actual hard white mana. Just in case I drew a Leyline Binding in the future, but not enough white mana, or I didn't want to shock for additional white mana, it's prudent to name Giant or whatever other types Elder on this Cavern Soul, so I can choose 1 white, 1 Cavern mana, cast a Flage. Again, very easy decision. You'll know the exceptions to naming things other than elemental on this Cavern when you see it. And this is one of them, but it's just pretty obvious why you name Giant here, because you're stuck on other generic white mana. Kill the Ocelot Pride, because that's way more important. Yep. Time to kill you, Johnny. And we're getting a lot of life. Flage. It got a big clock going, but I have Omnath. As long as the Omnath doesn't die, I can just keep going with the life gain, fetch, and stab. Or fetch on their turn, I should say. Yeah, they reprieve the endurance, which is fine. Just pitch so I can prevent the Flage to coming down. And I don't block in case they have a Galvanic Discharge as the last card. Just not interested in losing an Omnath to that. I don't need to. Or now I got Galvanic Discharge, a Lightning Bolt. Yeah, Elesh Norn here lets us finish the game off convincingly. Just preventing any Ambraptor top decks, any Flage ETBs. We have the Leyline Binding, so now 2 things at once. Prevents the ring from getting protection, so we can really just try and finish off the game as quickly as possible because we're quite low on timer. And yeah, so Force of Vigor, they're doing work, letting us fetch aggressively to and get our mana fixed. And that was a pretty straightforward game for the most part. Okay, on to the next round.